In the last section, we built a pretty simple application, which was a task manager or a to-do list. And in this section, we're going to do the same thing, except instead of using the local storage API, we're going to use Web SQL, which is basically a client-side database. So I'm going to do a lot of copy and pasting in this section, in this code, because there's quite a bit. And it's just tedious to have to type it all out. So let's paste in our initial starter code, which is just an HTML frame. We have our jQuery, jQuery mobile, and our on-device ready function. So what I want to do now is actually paste in the body, and we'll go over it. So we have our header, we have our page, our header data role, which just says add item. I actually set it up to look just like the form that we did in the previous local storage section. So we have an input, which has an ID of task input. We have a button with the ID of add. We have another button, which is pointing to the clear all function, which will clear all tasks. And then we have a message div, which we can put messages in. And then we have the list with the list view to format it nicely. So it's going to be a list of tasks. Alright, so let's go up to the JavaScript. And in the on-device ready function, we're going to paste some code. So what we're doing is we're initializing. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's just create our variables. So we want to say variable list element, and is going to be equal to, and we're going to use a little bit of jQuery. It's going to be equal to our tasks ID. All right. And the message, we're going to have a variable called message element, which will be equal to messages. And then we want to initialize our DB variable, but that's not going to be, it's not going to point to anything right now, so it's just empty. Here's where we populate it. So we're going to assign the database object to DB, and this is going to be through a function called getDatabase, which we'll create. And then we have a transaction. A transaction is basically an SQL statement or a query. It's the database doing something. So this takes a parameter, which is going to be another function, and we can use this TX transaction execute to actually execute transactions or statements. And we do that with tx.execute_SQL. And in this particular transaction, let me move over a little bit, we're creating a table if not exists. Now that's pretty important. You want to make sure you have that if not exists, just so you don't keep creating the same tables. And the tables is going to be called tasks. Now we need to put our fields, the fields that we want. So this table is going to have two fields, ID and name, which will be the task name. For ID, we declared it as an integer. It's also the primary key, and it will auto increment, so we don't have to insert the ID in our queries or our transactions. Okay, but we do need to specify a name. Okay, so if we go back, the next parameter for the transaction is database error, and then the success callback is going to be called get items. And you'll notice with transactions, the error callback comes first. It's usually the other way around. Usually it's success and then error, but for some reason this particular function goes error success. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the on-device ready. what we want is for when someone clicks, where is it? The add button, we want to add a task. So we need to use a little bit of jQuery up here, and we want to say document.ready, because we need this to execute when the document's ready. And we're going to say function, and in here is where we can write our jQuery. So we want to grab that add button, so we can do that with a jQuery selector. We'll say button, and it had an ID of add, so we can grab that, and we want to bind the click event. So bind click, and when it's clicked, we're going to run this function. So when it's clicked, what do we want to do? First, let's do a console log. This is just for debugging, really. Console log, we'll just say got task. Alright, so the next thing, we want to run a function called insert item. Insert item. Alright, so the next one I want to create is get database, and that's what we assign to this DB variable, get database. So function get database, and this is going to be with the actual API, the open database method. So we're going to return window dot open database. Alright, so we could have actually just assigned, we could have said db equals window dot open database. We could have did that, but I like to break it up and have this all in one function. So this takes a few parameters. We're going to name the database. We'll call it my to do, and then we need the version, which we'll just say 1.0, comma, and this is a user-friendly name for the database. We'll call it my to do database, and then finally we want the size that we want to allocate to the database. So we'll do 2 megabytes. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the get database function. Actually, we're going to move this quote over to here. Alright. Alright, so now I'm going to paste some stuff in. What we want to paste in now is get items, and that's going to just grab whatever tasks we have in the database. So let's paste that in. Alright, so this is going to run a select statement or transaction. We're going to console log entering get items, which we're entering into the method. We're going to run a transaction just like we did up here when we created our table, except it's going to be a select statement. So we're saying select all, the asterisk means all, from tasks, which is the name of the database. And we could add some options here, but we're not going to get into that. And then next we have our success and error callbacks. Alright, and then we just have a console log that's saying we're leaving the function. So we need our query success function, and I'm going to actually grab that and paste that in. It's kind of long. Alright, so query success, we have a TX parameter and results. Alright, so we're going to process the results set list. This is also where we generate our HTML, our list items. So first we're going to console log entering query success. That's just to let us know that we're entering that function. we're going to create a variable called len, L-E-N, which is going to be excuse me, equal to the number of results, which we can get with results.rows.length. And here we're going to initialize the output variable to just nothing, and then we're going to start a for loop. We're going to say as long as I is equal to 0, and as long as it's less than len, which is the amount of results, then we're going to create this output variable, or we're actually adding on to it. So we're saying output equals output, which is this blank variable, and then we're going to add the list HTML. So we have our lists with an ID. The ID is going to be equal to the actual result ID, and then for the text that's displayed in the list is going to be the name, the task name. So remember, we only have these two fields for our task table. It's ID and name. Down here, we're going to grab the element with the ID of tasks, and we're going to assign output. So that would be this list item to tasks, which down here we can see is an unordered list. So we're going to insert the lists inside of it. Let's see, the message is basically just going to tell us how many items. So we're saying there are, and then the variable len, items in your list. And then we're going to just call another console log, which will let us know that we're leaving the function. And then we have this tasks.listView refresh, and this is so we can keep our formatting for the list. Alright, so that's it for that function. The next function is going to be insert item, which is called right here. So this is called when we click on the add button. So let's create that. Pop that in there. So we're going to do our console log. We're going to create a variable called insert value, and this is just going to be equal to the task input. So it's equal to the whatever text we type in. And then we're going to call a transaction, and we're going to execute some SQL, which is insert into tasks. So insert into the tasks table the name. Alright, so name is the name of the value, or the key, and then the value is going to be insert value. Alright, which is whatever we type into the text box. Pretty easy. We don't have to specify an ID because we made it auto increment, so we don't have to do that. And then the next thing, we're going to do our error callback and then the success callback. And right here, we're going to clear out the value from the input box. So after it's submitted, we just want to clear the input. And then finally, we just have our console log. All right. So next, we're going to create the database error function, which is just going to grab the message div and insert some HTML into it. We're going to insert the text SQL error, and then we're going to concatenate on the error code. So pretty simple. And finally, we're going to create the clear all function, and this will just clear all of the tasks. So we have our console log. We're going to create a transaction, and the statement is delete from tasks. So that will delete everything from the task table, and that's going to call the database error, which is defined up here, and the get items for a successful transaction, which is right here. All right. So, and the final thing we're going to do here is take the text out of the input box. So we're going to just assign it to nothing, and then we want to return false because we don't want anything else to happen when that button's clicked. So that's pretty much it, and we don't need to test this on the device. We can actually test it right in Ripple. So let's reload. Alright, so we already have some items in the list from before, so I'm going to clear those out, and let's add in, we'll say pick up the kids, add as a task. You can see it automatically goes in there without any kind of page refresh. Let's say meeting with boss. You can add that. Alright, now we can also check down here if you're using Chrome, you want to use the developer tools, and under Web SQL you can see our database, my to do, and we can actually go to the task table and we can see the structure of our task table. So this is really cool. You know, that it's very easy to debug when you're using tools like this. So I would definitely suggest using Chrome. If you're using Firefox or even worse, Internet Explorer, if you're a developer, you can really benefit from using Chrome. So now all we have to do is click the clear tasks and everything's clear. We also have the number of tasks. So that's it. That's how you can use Web SQL. So now we've learned how to use local storage as well as Web SQL to build the same exact application.